afternoon. Fang and I are glad to be here in Shanghai to talk a little bit, share some of our thoughts about how building evacuation design has kind of evolved in our industry over time. And so the way we want to approach this is to think in terms of, there is an increased awareness of occupant evacuation in tall buildings, certainly since 9/11. That was a major factor in how we think about evacuation of tall buildings. Traditionally, our thinking was very much focused on fire events. You know, what happens if there's a fire? How do we evacuate people in that scenario? But it's really evolved from there to be much more mindful of different evacuation scenarios. And there's numerous foreseeable scenarios, things as simple as we lose our air conditioning in Dubai in the middle of the summer. You know, and so now we need to evacuate, do a full building evacuation. It's something that's rare, but it's a foreseeable aspect of design today. So the thinking has evolved so that we do design facilities now to facilitate full building evacuation. We have evolved our strategies, if you will, on how we do that. The other thing we wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of what's the next step. You know, we tend to do our buildings in isolation. We tend to treat each building as a single entity. And what we can foresee moving forward is that in dense urban environments, you know, what happens in one building has a strong impact on the adjacent buildings. And so to some extent, some of those things are codified in zoning ordinances and those sorts of things, but there really hasn't been a lot of holistic thinking about, you know, buildings that are grouped together in dense urban areas and how, you know, mass disaster between buildings might affect one from the other. We do this kind of in an overall context. You know, evacuating buildings is only part of a holistic fire safety approach for high-rise structures. So what does that include? That includes all the active and passive fire safety features that we use. And one of the really obvious and most important things in high-rise design is control the fire and control the movement of smoke. So we use active systems and passive systems to be able to do that. So for traditional, we use the fire-resistant structures and barriers as passive means, fire suppression systems, and then obviously fire detection, alarm, communication is critical to being able to tell people how to evacuate, when to evacuate, where to evacuate in emergency situations. And finally, managing the movement of smoke, because these tall buildings have a tremendous stack effect going on just naturally. Controlling the movement of smoke is very critical in tall buildings. So then the second component obviously is means of egress to facilitate occupant evacuation. And the idea of the means of egress now is it needs to be scalable. You need to be able to deal with a single floor evacuation or 3 floors or a portion of the building or all of the building. So you need to use all of the components of the building to be able to do that. And then finally, the other piece of it is the features that support firefighting operations in the building. It's difficult to fight a fire in a tall building, so providing the facilities for the fire service to be able to do that is important. So being in Shanghai, we thought we would take advantage of the location to talk about 3 of our favorite projects in Shanghai. The building that we're in and the 2 next door neighbors. And they really kind of, I think, do a nice job of sort of representing 3 different generations of tall buildings, you know, built over time, all very unique when they were built, and you know, all of them that sort of represent that evolution in thinking in terms of emergency evacuation. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Jin Mao Tower. It was really kind of a very early mixed-use project. Typically, projects here in China at that time were single-use buildings. They were either office buildings, or they were hotels, or they were residential buildings. And this was kind of one of the very early projects that was of a mixed-use design. It also has a dramatic atrium feature, which at the time was not something recognized in the Chinese codes. And so the approach there was really, you know, a balance of sort of international standards, international approach, plus local codes and practices. Again, based on a defend-in-place strategy, a traditional defend-in-place strategy, active fire systems, passive fire barriers to be able to control smoke and to facilitate occupant evacuation. One of the, this is kind of the first experience that we had, at least with dealing with the idea of refuge floors. So Jin Mao Tower takes actually a pretty traditional approach in the office portion. There are refuge areas on levels 15 and 30, but because of the unique design of the atrium and the hotel floors, took a little different approach there, where on the hotel floors there's a refuge area on every floor. It's part of the elevator lobby. In addition to that, there's a barrier between the guest rooms and the atrium itself. So that's an enhanced passive fire barrier that separates the guest rooms from the atrium space. That's a true defend-in-place sort of strategy for that type of building. A couple of things about the refuge floors that, again, this was kind of our first experience with it, but it's really carried forward to a lot of the projects that we do now, even in those cases where a refuge area or refuge floor may not be required. One of the things China code requires that we do is we interrupt the stairs at the refuge floors. So now instead of having a 100-story building with 100-story stairs, you have 5 20-story stairs, and it's much easier to manage stack effect and to pressurize the stairs and all of those other. It allows you to transfer from one stair to another if a stair is blocked using the refuge floor. So refuge floors are typically a 2-hour enclosure. They're similar to what you would do for an exit stair. The same level of protection, and they're typically mechanically pressurized. There are some codes that require natural ventilation. We really try to not do that because it does affect stack effect. It's very hard to manage or predict natural ventilation effects once you open a floor in a super tall building. It's hard to predict what the effects will be on other systems and stack effect in the building. So the second project, Fang is going to talk a little bit about the Shanghai World Financial Center. And it's an interesting project because it was really designed before 9/11, right? But then it was built you know, during and after that period. So there have been, you know, it has evolved in thinking a little bit in terms of how that project is done.
Good afternoon, everyone. We got the opportunity here to share our experience here regarding the super tall building fire life safety. When we're talking about the super tall, we realize now the building is not anymore addressing the old code. Sorry, yeah. I just caught a flu, so everyone, excuse me. Thank you. When we in China, particularly when we're sitting here, we're looking at the Jin Mao Tower, which everybody uses this as a good example to show how the super tall building in the past and the Shanghai Tower in the future. We see the atrium, big atrium connecting all the floors and about 100 meters high. In that time, we used the particular engineer study at that time try to justify the Chinese code, and we're still using the egress in defending place. That means people still prefer to stay either the fire floor and the floor above and below need to egress at the same time. The rest floor still go to the refuge area to looking for the further notice by fire department. All we have to, the last bottom line, we have to egress to the ground floor. But the case is not anymore after September 11. People realize the taller the building, the panic and the uncertainty they will facing regarding how the event would be, including fire. Jim Antell mentioned not just the fire occasion, some other special events such as power fair and chemical weapons, all the things during today's terrorist attack. People realize the better we just get to the floor, we just get to the ground floor. And in the ongoing Chinese New Code, which is going to be effective next May, particularly talking about how the super tall building could be even designed with more enhanced fire protection system. When we're talking about a tall building over 100 meters, Chinese code particularly mentioned about area of refuge. That means the whole entire floor has to be designed as the particular like a very strong box. People just go there with the empty occupancy, and the people use that at the interim level to go downstairs. And in the new Chinese code, particularly mentioned recommending the area of refuge floor has to be lower. The first area of refuge has to be better, 50 meters below 50 meters from the ground level to the first area of refuge. That's compared with current codes. It's more enhanced fire life safety features. And also from past, every 15 floors has to be designed with one area of refuge floor. Now we're upgrading with recommending 50 meters. So we can see this is a realize and awareness of the super tall building has to be designed particularly with something else, not just the normal building. And today our topic particularly talking about how to do the evacuation. In the past, people always think about, in case of fire, never use the stair to do the egress. But the case is not anymore also. With the new current IBC code and NIP 5000, particularly talking about the trade-off regarding you're using the elevator to supplemental the egress, you can also get benefit because for certain building over 135 meters, maybe the number I have to check, but yes, close enough. You have to design the fireman lift, fireman stairs to compromise because that's the lessons we learned from September 11. But in China, the motivation and the driving force for using the elevator to do the egress is the entire building, full building evacuation travel time. This is an example of a floor plan for the Shanghai World Financial Center. You can see everything, the most critical element regarding the fire life safety is in the core area, which you see the fire exit stairs, firefighter elevators, evacuations elevators, standpipe, and risers. Everything here, we use the shear wall to put the protection as an enclosure. This is very critical. If this failed, everything regarding fire life safety will be in danger. This is the section we can see the Shanghai World Financial Center. As the mixed-use occupancy, we're talking about the vertical city. The city has to be support themselves. That means you have mixed use from office occupancy, retail, some may be theater, some may be restaurant, observation area. Everything condensed, large population in the top floor because everybody wants to sit in higher and see the view. So that brings a challenge. The higher, the more challenge people get to egress. And the floor plan, sometimes for structural standpoint, they may shrink as the floor plan. So it's not very possible. Sometimes you're adding more stairs at the top. This is one challenge when we did the Shanghai World Financial Center. Original design, they actually proposed the tram car at the top to do the city view, which is by the fire life safety study. The fire department feel like, the risk for people's life still maybe have the possibility to be in danger. So that design has been changed with the current design. But it means from that time, we proposed using the elevator, particular for the observation. No, that's the speed up the shuttles. Yeah, shuttles, yes. Because the shuttle, when we do the observation, we have a lot of fare shuttles, which could be the best use to do the elevator because they not stop every floor. And it's good. Otherwise, when we propose the normal elevator to do the egress, we have to put the vestibule at every single floor, which architects don't like ideas. This is the Shanghai World Financial Center. You can see the number. We proposed 13 elevators to help the normal egress, which cutting the elevator time for the full building evacuation from over 3 hours close to little over 2 hours. The Chinese fire code requires the minimum fire rating for the stair enclosure is 2 hours. That means that's the minimum standard, but always, the design always come up with 2 hours. Nobody would think, it will be better to use the 3 hours. So that will become a dilemma situation. What's the best fire enclosure, fire resistant to compromise the people? If we have the 30,000 people, like the Shanghai Tower, actually the total occupant would be 40,000 people in that building. And the 3 buildings together, close to the 100,000 people. Think about that. If just by the stairs, that would be amazing, and the people will bring the panic. This curve shows the comparison if we use the elevator or not. If we don't have elevator, the total egress time for this one, Shanghai World Financial Center, is 130 minutes. So that means over 2 hours. The fire exit enclosure requirement is only 2 hours. So we have to upgrade to think about that. If we want to upgrade in the fire enclosure resistance, or we want to do something else, the answer is certain. We want to do engineer study and using a lot of cutting edge fire, the elevator technology to help the fire safety, which actually become the new trend for current fire life safety design for the new building. In American, I think already the mechanical and the fire life safety code starting put the formal language wording regarding the fire assisting the fire elevator design, which is not just something very general. They list a lot of the detailed requirement how to make that happen. In China, the good thing is we have the area of refuge, which is a very good assembling area. People can using that particular floor to upload and download the people. So we use that particular design in the Dubai Tower as well, some in the Korea. So we see the international standard and the local practice sometimes works very well between together. The world is flat. People sharing experience and technology. In China, people always rely more on the passive fire protection, which means they think the system always maybe have the malfunction, something maybe they just feel like the solid wall, firewall is better. So that's why the fire compartment is always the challenge for the overseas designer do the design here. But in US, like they started propose the fire elevator to do the egress. So I think the more we do the project, the more we feel like how actually the passive and active can work best. It's the learning process, but I think we're getting better. This is the Shanghai Tower. The challenge, in addition to the building, is over 600 meters. We can see it's absolutely the total full building evacuations over existing 2 hours. That's why we proposed over 10 the assistant of lifeboat to help with the egress, located in the different zones. And we do a lot of scenario, try to find the balance, what's the best, because we don't need to necessarily to using all the elevators to do the egress. Maybe some is better to use how many in the different zones. And we end up with the combined egress stair plus the elevator to do the egress. We try to lower the total egress time for all the scenario less than 2 hours. This is a table show the conclusion and the summary. Yeah, if people have questions, we can always address in the last. So the end story is with the new technology and the concept and the code is developing as well. We see the more code and addressing the more fundings by project, such as Jin Mao. At Jin Mao, we did a smoke study at that time, but we don't have the code to support. Jin Mao Tower, the Hyatt Hotel, the atrium, actually people may find interesting if you're familiar with Chinese code. They don't have the small curtain separate the balcony to the atrium. So you can see a beautiful atrium there with the guardrail. But in another case, you probably cannot see in the other super tall buildings because of code limitations. But in the coming Chinese smoke control code, you can see a lot of things from NIP 92B, but also you can see some new development from Chinese practice. The one thing very interesting is we did the analysis, and people always concerned about the smoke buoyancy if the smoke is not hot enough. You cannot just using the top atrium smoke fans to help the exhaust the balcony smoke. That's why they want the balcony have separated smoke exhaust zones, but not in the Jin Mao case. In the new code, actually gave us flexibility without doing the smoke curtain. So we see the project actually sometimes is the driving force for code development as well. So emergency planning and response consideration, we have the technology, we have the concept, and we have the needs. And how to make that happen, I think from designer, from the building operator, and from everybody else, the public has to be aware of this. What's the challenge for current fire life safety issue for us, particularly for super tall building? So we have to plan ahead and making the plan happen. Thank you.